The parking garage was quiet at that hour. Not peaceful, quiet the way places get when everyone who belongs there has already moved on. Claire Hendricks sat in the driver's seat of her 8-year-old Honda, engine off, hands resting on the steering wheel like she was waiting for a light that wasn't coming. The fluorescent light above her flickered once, twice, then steadied. She didn't move. On the passenger seat was a manila folder. Plain. No labels, no color-coded tabs, no sticky notes. Just a folder, slightly thick, slightly worn at the corners from being opened and closed more times than she could count. She had checked its contents that morning before she left the house. She had checked them again at the gas station 2 miles away. She didn't need to check them again. She knew exactly what was inside. She just needed a moment to remember why she had built it. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She looked at the screen without picking it up. The message was short, clean, delivered with the kind of confidence that doesn't bother with punctuation. My client is prepared to settle. Walk away from the hearing today and this ends quietly. No counteroffer after this. Claire read it once. Then she set the phone face down on the passenger seat next to the folder. She sat with the message for exactly 30 seconds. She counted, the way she always counted when she needed to stay level. And then she picked up the folder, opened the car door, and stepped out into the cold garage air. She didn't text back. She walked toward the elevator, folder at her side, footsteps even, and the thing that nobody in that building knew yet, not Marcus Webb with his mahogany office and his framed verdicts, not Diana with her pressed blazer and her practiced composure, was that Claire Hendricks had been waiting for this morning for 7 months, not dreading it, waiting for it. The way you wait for something you've already finished preparing for. The elevator doors opened. She stepped in. The doors closed behind her. Neither of them saw what was coming. To understand how a family gets to a parking garage threat on a Tuesday morning, you have to go back further than the lawsuit. You have to go back to a kitchen table in late October, a house that smelled like cedar and old books, and 2 sisters sitting across from a man in a gray suit, reading their mother's last wishes out loud to a room that had stopped breathing. Claire was 34 when her mother, Ruth Hendricks, passed. It wasn't sudden. There had been months of decline, slow and then faster, the way illness tends to move when it decides it's finished being patient. Claire had driven up every other weekend for the last year of her mother's life. Not because anyone asked her to, because Ruth would leave a voicemail on Thursday evenings saying something like, "I made that soup you like, the one with the potatoes," and Claire understood that those voicemails were not about soup. Diana came when she could. That was how she phrased it, when she could, and it was phrased that way so often that eventually the family absorbed it as fact. Diana was busy. Diana had the career, the contacts, the life that required managing. Claire had the flexibility, so Claire came on weekends and Diana came when she could, and that arrangement settled into the family like furniture nobody remembered choosing. Ruth never complained about it. That wasn't her way. She thanked Claire quietly, privately, in the manner of a woman who understood the difference between people who showed up and people who intended to. She pressed Claire's hand sometimes when she was leaving, not dramatically, just firmly, the way you hold on to something you want to make sure remembers it was held. When Ruth died on a Wednesday morning in November, Claire was the one who was there. She had driven up the night before on a feeling she couldn't name. Diana arrived 4 hours later. The will reading was 2 weeks after the funeral. The man in the gray suit was the estate attorney, a quiet, efficient man named Harold Bates, who had handled Ruth's affairs for 11 years and clearly wanted to be done with this particular appointment before noon. He read through the preliminary language the way people do when they've read it so many times it has stopped meaning anything, and then he arrived at the specific bequests, and the room adjusted the way rooms do when money is about to become a conversation. The family home was to be jointly inherited. The small interior design business Ruth had run for 22 years was to be split equally between both daughters, along with the business accounts and its client relationships. A savings account, modest but meaningful, was to be divided in half. Harold Bates finished reading, folded the document, and looked up. The room was quiet. Claire looked at Diana. Diana was not crying. Her eyes were dry and focused and moving, not around the room, but inward, the way eyes move when a person is calculating something they don't want anyone to see them calculating. Her jaw was set. Her hands were folded in her lap with a specific kind of stillness that Claire recognized immediately because she had seen it before, across different tables, over different disagreements, for most of her life. It was the stillness Diana used when she was deciding something, not grieving, deciding. The drive home was quiet. That evening, Diana called. The conversation started gently the way Diana's conversations always started, warmly, with questions about how Claire was holding up, with the kind of soft tone that was less about care and more about setup. Claire answered the small questions and waited. She had learned to wait with Diana. Eventually, Diana arrived at the point. "I've been thinking about the estate," Diana said. "It's a lot to manage for both of us. You know, I've always been more involved in the business side of things. I think it would make more sense if I oversaw the administration, just to keep things clean. Mom would have wanted it handled properly." Claire asked what that meant specifically. Diana said it meant letting her make the practical decisions while Claire stayed informed. Claire said she'd prefer to handle things the way the will described, equally, jointly, with both of them present for major decisions. There was a pause. Then Diana said, "Then I guess we'll let the lawyers figure it out." She said it pleasantly, calmly, the way you say something you've already decided before you picked up the phone. 2 weeks later, the legal notice arrived. Diana had filed a formal contest of the will. The filing alleged that Ruth Hendricks had not been of sound mind in the final months before her death when the will was last amended. It alleged undue influence. It alleged that the distribution as written did not reflect Ruth's true intentions. It was thorough, professionally constructed, and entirely false, and it bore the firm name of Marcus Webb. Claire had heard the name once in passing from her own attorney, a compact, unhurried man named Daniel Osei, who had handled estate work for 15 years and wore the same 3 ties on rotation. When Claire called him the morning the notice arrived, he listened to everything she said without interrupting. When she finished, he was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Marcus Webb is very good at making people feel like they've already lost. That is, specifically, his strategy." He paused. "Does it work on you?" Claire thought about the parking garage text she hadn't received yet, 7 months in the future, and how she had set the phone face down and gotten out of the car. "No," she said. "Good," Daniel said. "Then let's get to work. I need everything you have. Every text message, every voicemail, every handwritten note, every receipt, every email, anything that touched your mother's life or her intentions in the last 5 years. Claire said she'd get him everything. She went home. She made coffee. She pulled out the box she kept under the bed in the spare room, a large plastic bin with a cracked lid that she had been filling without particular intention for years. Not because she was strategic, because she was the kind of person who couldn't throw away a handwritten note. Because she kept receipts in an envelope in the back of her planner. Because when her mother said something important on a phone call, Claire wrote it down in the small notebook she kept on her kitchen counter. She opened the bin and began to read. Marcus Webb's strategy arrived exactly as Daniel had described it. Within the first month, Claire's mailbox, digital and physical, became a mechanism of pressure. Document requests with tight deadlines, discovery filings that required responses within 10 business days, requests for financial records going back 7 years, interrogatories, formal written questions that required formal written answers, asking Claire to account for every interaction she'd had with her mother's finances. It was a drowning strategy, not designed to prove anything specific, designed to exhaust. Claire answered everyone. She worked evenings at her kitchen table with her laptop and Daniel's guidance, and the steady, methodical approach of someone who had spent her entire adult life doing careful work that nobody applauded. She was a project coordinator by profession. She managed timelines, tracked deliverables, caught discrepancies before they became disasters. Her entire skill set was designed precisely for this. Diana had filed against the wrong person and didn't know it yet. The second month brought the phone call that arrived like Diana was extending an olive branch. Her voice was soft, almost sorry. "Claire, I don't want this to become something ugly between us. I really don't. We both just lost Mom. This should be a time when we come together, not fight over paperwork." She let the word paperwork carry a slight smile in it, diminishing the whole proceeding, reducing it to something bureaucratic and unnecessary. "I just want to protect what Mom built. I can do that better if I have the authority to make real decisions. I'll make sure you're taken care of." Taken care of. Claire wrote those 3 words in her notebook immediately after the call ended, not because they were unusual, because they were precise. Taken care of was not the same as treated equally. It was the language of someone who had already allocated another person's portion for them. She told Diana she would continue to honor the will as written. That night, the first of the unknown number texts arrived. "This will not go well for you." Claire screenshotted it immediately and emailed it to Daniel at 11:45 at night. He responded at 11:47. "Perfect. Save everything." She did. The 3rd month was when Claire found the letter. It came buried in a stack of documents Diana's legal team submitted as part of discovery. Hundreds of pages of records, business files, financial summaries, correspondence. Most of it was exactly what it appeared to be. But on a Tuesday afternoon, sitting at her kitchen table with coffee going cold beside her, Claire turned a page and stopped. It was a letter. 1 page. Dated 4 years earlier. The letterhead was plain, just an address, her old apartment address which she had not lived at in 3 years. The language was formal and clean. "I, Claire Ann Hendricks, hereby confirm that I have no interest in or claim to any assets, property, or business holdings related to the estate of Ruth Hendricks, and waive all rights thereto." And at the bottom, her signature. Her name, in her handwriting. She read it 3 times. Then she went to her desk drawer and pulled out a birthday card her mother had sent her the same year the letter was supposedly written. She held the card beside the letter and looked at the signature on the letter again. The loop on the capital C was wrong. In her actual signature, the one on the birthday card response she'd written back, the one on her lease from that year, the one on every document she'd ever signed. The loop closed inward, curled back on itself. On the letter in front of her, it opened outward, small. Easy to miss. Wrong. She sat with it for a long time. She didn't call Diana. She didn't call Daniel in anger or panic. She set the letter flat on the table, took a photograph of it, and then she opened her laptop and began searching for certified forensic handwriting analysts in the state. She found one. She called in the morning. She booked an appointment and did not tell anyone except Daniel, and only in the most specific terms. "There's a document in discovery I need analyzed. How do I do this without alerting their side?" Daniel was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "You do it quietly, which is exactly what you're doing. Send me the document tonight." She did. He called her back 2 days later. His voice had a different quality in it, still calm, but sharpened. "Claire," he said, "I need you to understand what this means if the analysis confirms what we think." "I understand," she said. "This changes the nature of the case significantly. I know. Are you prepared for that?" She thought about her mother's hand pressing hers at the door, firm, like something that wanted to be remembered. "Yes," she said, "let's keep going." The 4th and 5th months were the quietest of the 7. Not because nothing was happening, because everything was happening below the surface, slowly, with the patience that good preparation requires. The handwriting analysis came back 6 weeks after submission. Dr. Patricia Harmon, a certified forensic document examiner with 21 years of experience and a curriculum vitae that ran to 4 pages, had identified 7 specific points of deviation between the signature on the letter and authenticated samples of Claire's signature. Her conclusion was unambiguous. The signatures were not produced by the same person. Claire read the report sitting at her kitchen table on a Thursday afternoon. She read it all the way through without stopping. Then she folded it back into its envelope and placed it in the manila folder. The emails came through Daniel's subpoena in the 5th month. Diana's legal team objected, naturally. Webb filed a motion to limit the scope of discovery. Daniel pushed back. The judge on the preliminary motions, not the same judge who would hear the full case, granted partial access to Diana's business email correspondence related to the estate. Webb clearly thought the partial restriction had protected his client. He was wrong about what was in the part that was released. Among 340 emails covering 18 months of correspondence, there was a thread between Diana and a woman named Shelley Marsh, an administrative contact Diana used for various business tasks. The thread was 6 emails long. Most of it was unremarkable. But in the third email, buried between a discussion about filing deadlines and a question about formatting, Diana had written, "The problem is, Claire will contest anything that looks like it was decided without her. We need something that shows she already stepped back voluntarily. Something dated before Mom changed the will the last time. Make it look like something she would have written. Old address, formal language, keep it simple. I'll review before anything is sent anywhere." And in Shelley's response, 2 lines. "Understood. I'll have a draft to you by Thursday. Should I use her old signature from the lease copy you sent me?" Claire read the thread twice. She did not feel what she expected to feel, not rage, not even the particular sharp grief of being betrayed by a sibling. She felt something that she could only describe as a terrible, clarifying sadness. Not for herself, for Diana, for the amount of energy it took to build a lie that careful. For the fact that all of that effort could have been avoided if Diana had simply been willing to share something their mother had left for both of them. She put the emails in the folder. She added one more item in the 6th month, the last piece she needed before the folder was finished. Not found, not subpoenaed. Given. She had been sorting through a box of her mother's personal effects, things the estate attorney had transferred to her as co-beneficiary, items from Ruth's desk and bedside table. Inside a small wooden box, tucked beneath a collection of old receipts and a photograph of both daughters taken at Christmas years ago, was a folded piece of notebook paper. Ruth's handwriting, immediate and familiar. Undated, but the paper had the particular softness of something written recently. It said, "Both my girls, equal. That's the only way I know how to love. I never learned to do it by halves. Claire, I know you'll be quiet about it. Don't be. You are owed exactly as much as anyone else in this family. Don't let anyone tell you differently. Not even your sister." Claire sat with that paper for a long time. Then she added it, gently, to the folder. The night before the hearing, she laid everything out on the kitchen table. Not to review it. She knew it by heart. She laid it out the way a person sets the table for a meal they've been preparing for a long time. Handwriting analysis first. The email thread second. Financial contribution records, receipts, bank transfers, documented repairs to the family home Claire had paid for over the years. Third. The voicemails she had transcribed and saved, her mother's voice on 6 different messages referencing Claire's role, Claire's involvement, Claire's intention to be part of the family estate, the note from the wooden box in its clear sleeve, and last, behind everything, the original will, certified, clean, unchanged. She closed the folder. She made tea. She sat at the table in the quiet of her house, the same table where she had worked every evening for 7 months, and she thought about her mother. Not about the case, not about tomorrow, just about Ruth, the soup with the potatoes, the Thursday voicemails, the hand pressed firmly at the door. The truth doesn't need anyone to defend it, her mother had told her once, during a completely different disagreement, years before any of this. It just needs to be somewhere it can be found. Claire had spent 7 months making sure it was findable. She had nothing left to prepare. She went to bed at 10. She slept without difficulty. In the morning, she received the text in the parking garage. She read it, set the phone down, picked up the folder, and walked into the building. The courthouse hallway had the particular energy of a place where people came to resolve things they couldn't resolve anywhere else. Clerks moved with the practiced efficiency of people for whom urgency had become routine. Attorneys stood in clusters, reviewing documents, speaking in low voices. Strangers sat on benches with their own folders, their own versions of the morning Claire was having. She found Daniel near the courtroom entrance. He was wearing his second tie, the navy one, which she had come to understand meant he was focused. He looked at her once, assessed, and nodded in the way people nod when an answer is confirmed rather than given. "You have everything?" he asked. "Yes," she said. "They reached out to you this morning?" She showed him the text. He read it, handed the phone back, said nothing. "That's a record," he said finally. "I know." They went in. Diana was already seated. She had chosen a position near the front, not the closest seat, but a considered one, the kind of placement that said present and prepared without seeming aggressive. She was wearing a charcoal blazer, hair pulled back, the look of someone who had spent an appropriate amount of time deciding how to appear effortless. Beside her, Marcus Webb sat with the particular ease of a man who had done this so many times that the novelty had evaporated entirely. He was reviewing something on a legal pad. He glanced up when Claire entered. He took her in, the plain folder, the modest attorney, the lack of theater, and returned to his notes. Claire sat where Daniel indicated. She set the folder on the table in front of her and rested her hands on top of it. Diana looked over once. Her eyes moved to the folder, then back to Claire's face. Claire looked back at her evenly. Neither of them spoke. The judge entered and the room stood. Judge Eleanor Marsh was a compact woman in her mid-50s, with reading glasses she wore pushed up on her head until she needed them, and a manner that suggested she had stopped being impressed by presentations sometime in the previous decade. She reviewed her file briefly, looked at both tables, and said, "Let's begin." Marcus Webb stood. He was, Claire had to concede, very good. He moved through his opening with the ease of someone who had delivered this particular kind of argument enough times that it had become something close to music. Familiar progressions, well-timed pauses, the right word placed in the right position to create the right impression. He described Diana as the devoted daughter, the one who stayed close, who managed the business's day-to-day realities when Ruth's health began to decline, who handled vendor relationships and client communications, and the 1,000 small decisions that keep a business alive when the person running it can no longer manage them alone. He described Claire with careful, calibrated language, not attacking. That would have been too obvious. He simply subtracted her. She was present in his argument the way an absence is present. You notice it precisely because something should be there and isn't. Ms. Hendricks maintained a life elsewhere, he said. She had her own career, her own obligations. She was not a consistent presence in the day-to-day realities of her mother's life or her mother's business. He let the word consistent do its work. What we have here is a situation in which one daughter bore the weight of the family's needs for years, and another has now arrived to claim equal ownership of what that sacrifice produced. He paused with the satisfaction of a man who had just placed a piece he expected to be unmovable. Furthermore, he said, we have documentary evidence that Ms. Claire Hendricks herself, 4 years prior, indicated clearly that she did not wish to be involved in the family estate. He lifted the letter from his table. Clean, white, official-looking. He passed it to the bailiff for submission. "Your Honor," he said, "the record will speak for itself." He sat down. The judge accepted the letter, reviewed it briefly, set it on her desk. Daniel stood. He did not match Webb's energy. He did not try to. He stood the way he always stood, straightforward, unperforming, as if the room were simply a place where information was being organized rather than a stage. "Your Honor," he said, "we appreciate counsel's thorough presentation. We don't dispute that Diana Hendricks was involved in the family business. We don't dispute that she worked hard. What we're here to discuss today is not effort, it's not presence, it's authenticity." He paused on the last word, not dramatically, just long enough for it to settle. "We will be presenting evidence that speaks directly to the documents before this court, and we ask that the record reflect everything submitted before any conclusions are drawn." The judge looked at him over her reading glasses. "That is precisely how this proceeding works, Counselor." "Thank you, Your Honor." He sat down. Diana leaned toward Webb briefly. He responded in a murmur. She straightened. Whatever he told her, it was reassuring. She settled back into her chair with the bearing of someone who had already written the ending. The judge moved through the preliminary record, background on the estate, the timeline of the will, the specifics of Diana's contest. She asked Diana several clarifying questions. When had she become involved in the business operations? What was the nature of her authority? What specific decisions had she made, and under what capacity? Diana answered each one with practiced fluency. She had clearly been prepared thoroughly. Her answers were precise, emotionally appropriate, and consistently framed around sacrifice. Every answer led back to the same point: she was the one who was there. The judge nodded, wrote, moved forward. Then she turned to the letter. "Ms. Diana Hendricks," she said, "your counsel has submitted a document purporting to be a voluntary waiver of estate interest from your sister, dated 4 years prior. Can you tell the court how this document came to be in your possession?" Diana answered smoothly. She described finding it in her mother's files after the death, in a folder of correspondence. She described her surprise, and here she inflected the word with just the right measure of reluctance, as if she hadn't wanted to use it but felt she had no choice. She described her belief that Claire, knowing her own limited involvement, had wanted to formalize that position. The judge listened without interruption. When Diana finished, the judge turned to Daniel. "Counselor, your response?" Daniel stood. "Your Honor, we'd like to submit several exhibits in response to this document." He approached the bench. The bailiff stepped forward. Daniel passed over the folder, not Claire's folder, a copy, organized by tab, prepared weeks ago. Then he returned to his table. "First," he said, "we're submitting a forensic document examination report prepared by Dr. Patricia Harmon, a certified forensic handwriting analyst with 21 years of practice. Dr. Harmon was provided with authenticated signature samples from my client, notarized documents, financial records, lease agreements spanning 12 years, and asked to compare them to the signature on the contested letter. Her report identifies 7 specific points of divergence between the contested signature and my client's authenticated signature. Her conclusion is unambiguous. The signatures were not produced by the same individual." Webb was on his feet. "Objection, Your Honor. Hearsay. The analyst is not present to be cross-examined. Dr. Harmon is available for cross-examination at the court's convenience," Daniel said without turning. "We anticipated this objection. Her availability was confirmed in writing to opposing counsel 14 days ago." The judge looked at Webb. "The objection is noted. We'll address the admissibility question fully after I've reviewed the report. Continue, Counselor." Webb sat. Daniel continued. "Second, we're submitting email correspondence obtained through the court-approved discovery process, specifically a thread from the business email account of Diana Hendricks, dated 18 months ago, in which Ms. Hendricks explicitly discusses the creation of a document bearing my client's name and signature for the purpose of establishing that Claire Hendricks had voluntarily stepped back from any estate claim." The room changed. Not dramatically, not loudly, but the quality of the silence shifted, became denser, more deliberate. The judge's hand, which had been moving a pen across a notepad, stopped. Webb leaned forward. "Your Honor, you'll have an opportunity to respond, Mr. Webb." The judge's voice was even, without sharpness, but it was the kind of evenness that carries the weight of finality in it. "Let counsel finish." Webb sat back. Daniel continued without hurry. The relevant portions of the thread include the following exchange. Ms. Hendricks writes, and I'm quoting directly from the submitted exhibit, "We need something that shows she already stepped back voluntarily. Something dated before Mom changed the will the last time. Make it look like something she would have written." The response from the recipient, one Shelley Marsh, asks, "Should I use her old signature from the lease copy you sent me?" He paused. "Your Honor, we are not here today to make accusations of criminal conduct. That determination belongs to the appropriate authorities. What we are here to do is establish that the document submitted by opposing counsel as a centerpiece exhibit in this case is not authentic, and that my client's estate rights, as clearly documented in a valid will executed by a woman of sound mind, are intact and should be administered exactly as written. He sat down. Diana's jaw had tightened. It was the only visible change in her face, but it was visible. Webb leaned toward her immediately, speaking in a voice low enough that the words didn't carry. Diana listened. She nodded once, mechanically, the way people nod when they are no longer processing information and are simply performing the act of receiving it. The judge reviewed the submitted materials in silence for several minutes. No one in the room spoke. The clock on the wall was audible. Claire sat still, hands resting on the table, and watched the judge's eyes move across the pages of the handwriting report. She watched the moment they reached the conclusion section. The judge's expression didn't change, but she picked up her pen and underlined something. When the judge looked up, she looked at Diana. "Ms. Hendricks," she said, "I'm going to ask you directly, and I expect a direct answer. Are you the author of the email correspondence submitted as Exhibit C in these proceedings?" Diana looked at Webb. Webb's expression was controlled, professional, giving nothing away, but his eyes had the quality of a person who has arrived at an accounting they were not prepared to make. "Ms. Hendricks," the judge said again, "I asked you a question." Diana turned back to the judge. Several seconds passed. "I would like to consult with my attorney," she said. "You are welcome to do so," the judge said, "after you answer the question." Another silence. Longer. "I wrote emails during a stressful period," Diana said finally. "That may not reflect—" "Ms. Hendricks." The judge's voice didn't rise. It simply landed with more precision. "Did you write those emails, yes or no?" Diana looked down at the table. "Yes," she said. The word dropped into the room like something heavy and solid, irrevocable. No one moved. Even the clerk who had been typing stopped. The judge wrote for a moment. When she looked up again, her posture had shifted, not differently, but more finally. Less gathering information, more organizing outcomes. "We'll take a recess," she said. When the judge returned 20 minutes later, the room felt narrower. Not physically, atmospherically. The space where Diana's certainty had lived was no longer there, and its absence was felt by everyone. The judge proceeded without theater. She had the manner of someone closing accounts. Her language was specific. The contested letter was excluded from the record. Its authenticity could not be established, and the surrounding correspondence raised serious questions about its origin that the court was not in a position to resolve today, but was obligated to refer. She said the word refer with the particular emphasis of someone marking an item for follow-up that is not small. She moved to the will contest itself. The grounds for contest were examined one by one. The claim of unsound mind. The judge noted that Ruth Hendricks had been seen by 2 physicians in the months before her death, both of whom documented normal cognitive function. The claim of undue influence. The judge noted that the will had been updated not once but twice in the final 2 years of Ruth's life, each time through Harold Bates, the estate attorney of 11 years, who had filed a statement confirming that Ruth had been clear, consistent, and unambiguous about her wishes at both sessions. The claim that the distribution did not reflect Ruth's true intentions. The judge noted that the written will, prepared and certified by a licensed estate attorney, represented the clearest available expression of those intentions, and that no credible evidence had been submitted to challenge that document on its own terms. She denied the will contest. She ordered the estate to be administered as written, equally jointly, as Ruth Hendricks had intended. She ordered an independent administrator to oversee the process and ensure that both beneficiaries had transparent access to all estate accounts and business records during the transition. She noted, for the record, that the submission of a potentially forged document in formal legal proceedings would be referred to the appropriate authorities for review, and that the professional conduct of counsel involved in its submission would similarly be reviewed through the appropriate channels. That last part she said without looking at Webb. Webb's pen was moving. He was writing things down, the mechanical action of a man maintaining form when substance had already collapsed. Claire did not look at him. The judge asked one final question before she closed. "Ms. Claire Hendricks," she said, looking directly at Claire for the first time since the proceedings began, "you've heard the rulings today. I want to ask you directly, is the outcome you're seeking simply the administration of the estate as your mother intended?" Claire stood. "Yes, Your Honor," she said. "Nothing more." The judge nodded once, wrote something, closed the folder. "Then that is what this court will ensure." Outside the courtroom, the hallway had the specific quality of aftermath: the same walls, the same floors, the same institutional lighting. But whatever had been charged in the air before the doors opened had discharged and settled. People moved past with their own paperwork, their own versions of urgency. None of it felt urgent anymore. It felt like ordinary life, which is exactly what Claire wanted. She was standing near the window at the end of the hall, folder still in hand, when she heard footsteps behind her. She turned. Diana. Webb was not with her. She had come down the hall alone, and she looked like a version of herself that had been taken apart and put back together slightly wrong. Still composed, still upright, but the composure was different now. It was the composure of someone holding themselves together rather than someone who had never needed to. She stopped a few feet away. She looked at the folder. "You had all of that," she said. It wasn't a question. "The whole time." "Yes," Claire said. Diana looked at her. Really looked, in the way people look when they are trying to reconcile what they see with what they believed. She shook her head slightly. "You should have just talked to me," she said. Her voice was quieter than Claire had heard it in years. Not soft exactly, just smaller. Claire looked at her for a moment. "I did," she said, "the night after the will reading. I told you I wanted to honor what Mom wrote. You said you'd let the lawyers figure it out." Diana looked away. "You hired someone to forge my signature," Claire said. She said it without heat, just placed it there, in the air between them, where it needed to be. "You had someone copy my handwriting from a lease and put it on a letter designed to take away what Mom left me, and you still want to talk about why I didn't communicate enough." Diana said nothing. "I didn't do any of this to hurt you," Claire said. "I did it because Mom was clear about what she wanted. And she was right to be clear about it, because someone needed to be." She picked up her folder. "I hope you get some help figuring out why sharing something was worse to you than losing everything." She walked down the hall. She didn't look back. Daniel was waiting near the elevator. He watched her come down the hall with the same expression he'd had all morning. Focused, level, carrying no more than the moment required. "You did well in there?" he said. "The documents did well," Claire said. He almost smiled. "That's usually how it works." The elevator arrived. They stepped in. The doors closed. Outside, the air was cold and sharp, and entirely without drama. Claire stood on the steps for a moment, watching the city move, people with bags and phones and their own invisible folders full of things that mattered enormously to them and to no one else. She felt the weight of the manila folder in her hand and thought about setting it down somewhere, leaving it, but she knew she'd bring it home and file it properly, the way she always filed things, because that was who she was. She thought about her mother. Not the illness, not the estate, not the courtroom. She thought about a Saturday morning years ago, Ruth at the kitchen table with coffee, morning light coming through the window over the sink, pointing at the small notebook Claire kept by the stove. "You always write things down," Ruth had said, half observing, half approving. "Good." "That's good. The world belongs to the people who pay attention." Claire had laughed and said she just didn't like forgetting things. Her mother had pressed her hand the same way she always did, firmly, like a reminder. "It's the same thing," Ruth had said. The drive home was quiet. Not the absence of sound quiet of the parking garage that morning. A different kind. The kind that arrives after something that needed to happen finally has. She made the turns she always made, passed the gas station, turned onto her street, pulled into the driveway of the house she rented, and had repainted the trim on 2 summers ago at her own expense, a receipt for which was in the folder on the passenger seat. She went inside. She made tea. She sat at the kitchen table, the same chair, the same view of the backyard where nothing in particular grew, and she opened her journal to a blank page. She wrote one line. She thought the right lawyer could replace the truth. She was wrong. She capped the pen, set the journal flat, picked up her tea. The afternoon light came through the window at a low angle and settled across the table in a long stripe, and she sat in it and did not think about anything in particular, which was its own kind of victory, the ability to simply be in a moment without armor, without the next task waiting, without something to prove. Her phone buzzed. Daniel, independent administrator confirmed. Process starts next week. You'll have full access. She replied, "Thank you for everything." He replied, "Thank the folder." She set the phone face down. Not like that morning. Not as a gesture of refusal, just face down the way you set a phone when you're done with it. And she picked up her tea and she sat in the light and she let the afternoon be what it was. The estate was administered over the following 3 months. Transparently, jointly, exactly as Ruth Hendricks had written it. The business, a small, well-regarded interior design firm with a loyal client base and more goodwill than its books reflected, was assessed, managed, and transitioned in a way that gave both sisters their rightful share. Claire took an active role, not to dominate, because it was hers to be active in. Marcus Webb's name appeared in a professional conduct review 2 months after the hearing. The details were not public, but Daniel mentioned it once, briefly, in a practical tone that suggested it was exactly the kind of consequence that belonged to the kind of choice Webb had facilitated. Diana did not call. Claire did not expect her to. Not yet. Maybe not for a long time. Maybe someday, across a different kitchen table, with enough distance between the parking garage text and whatever they built next, there would be a conversation worth having. Claire left that door unlocked. She did not stand at it. She packed a box of her mother's things one Saturday in early spring, the photograph from Christmas, the wooden box, a ceramic mug Ruth had used every morning for 20 years. She put them on the shelf in her living room where she could see them from the kitchen table. She started working with a new client that week, a straightforward project management contract, nothing complicated. She took notes from the first call. She organized them into a folder. She labeled it clearly. Not because she expected a fight, because she was the kind of person who paid attention, and the world, her mother had told her once, belonged to exactly those people. She was starting to believe it. If this story hit different for you, if you've ever been the quiet one, the one who documented instead of demanded, the one who kept the folder when everyone assumed you'd fold, then you already know why this ending matters. Hit that subscribe button. Share this with someone who needs to hear it, and drop a comment below telling me, would you have walked into that courtroom? Because the people who fight back quietly are the ones I want in this community. See you in the next one.